Hello, thank you for tuning in to learn more about how to comply with St. Paul's 4D Affordable Housing Incentive Program. This video is oriented for property owners already enrolled in the program. However, this is also helpful content for tenants of 4D properties and prospective applicants who are seeking to better understand the program once a property is enrolled. 4D compliance is reviewed once a year during a property's 10-year 4D contract term. The annual compliance timeline is the same each year unless otherwise noted on the 4D and Minnesota Housing websites. In early January, St. Paul will publish the updated compliance rent roll form on the 4D website. Around the same time, Minnesota Housing will provide an updated version of the LRC reapplication form on their website. St. Paul's compliance rent roll form is due back to the city by the end of January. This is due earlier than the form to Minnesota Housing because the city is responsible for reviewing and reporting on your compliance with the 4D program. The city's compliance determinations are due shortly after the property owner's LRC reapplication forms are due to Minnesota Housing. 4D staff will review compliance rent roll forms throughout February and March. If your property is determined to be less than 100% compliant and you wish to appeal this decision, you can do so during the appeal period indicated in the city's determination letters. By March 31st, property owners are independently responsible for submitting their LRC reapplication form and fees to Minnesota Housing. Then in April, 4D staff report the final compliance determinations to Minnesota Housing once all appeals are reviewed. These specific dates are important to remember for the duration of your time in the 4D program. Additionally, it's important to learn about the day-to-day compliance you can do year-round to make the annual compliance period a lot smoother for yourself, the city, and Minnesota Housing. Here's a visual timeline of the compliance process that was outlined on the previous slide. One of the most important tasks to remember throughout the year is to maintain your records. You should keep the digital versions of your 4D contracts for future reference. These are especially helpful to refresh your memory on which units at your property are classified as 4D. Next, you must maintain income verification documents throughout the year. We'll discuss this process in a later slide. Additionally, you must keep a record of relevant documentation for any rent increases that are related to just cause move-outs. An example of this documentation is a tenant's written notice to vacate a 4D unit. Lastly, you should keep copies of your LRC reapplication forms that you submit to Minnesota Housing every year, just in case you need to refer back to them. When determining rent prices throughout the year, remember these guidelines. First and foremost, keep up to date with annual 4D rent limits. You can refer to the 4D website for the latest rent limit table. Rent limits are the main factor to consider as they apply regardless of other rent rules, as I will share more about now. There is a 3% limit on annual rent increases, meaning that 4D units rents can't be raised more than 3% during the 12-month 4D annual compliance period, which aligns with the calendar year. The only exception to the 3% limit is for voluntary move-outs or just cause lease terminations. The rent limits apply regardless. For example, if a 4D unit's rent is nearing the limit and only 1.5% away from the limit, 1.5% would be the maximum allowable increase. This is because the rent limit is considered first, then the 3% limit on annual rent increases. Lastly, make sure to factor in utility allowances when comparing your rents to the rent limits. Rent and utility allowances together cannot exceed rent limits under any circumstances. Similar to rent, there are various income-related guidelines to incorporate into your day-to-day property management. First, keep up to date on the annual income limits for 4D. These limits are very important because of income verification and can be found on the 4D website. Income verification is an important part of the 4D program to make sure preserved housing is housing the intended population. Income verification is only required for new tenants at the time of their initial move-in. All tenants that were already residing at the property at the time of enrollment in the 4D program are exempt from income verification. However, once someone moves on from a 40 unit and another tenant moves in, the new tenant's income must be reviewed. Income must be verified for all income earning adults in the household. After the initial income verification and approval, you do not need to review their income again. A list of acceptable income documentation is listed on this slide and on the program guidelines. As mentioned, please ensure you retain these completed forms in your records, as 4D staff may request the documents for review as needed. If you sublet any 4D units, please make sure the property owner or manager are facilitating the subleasing arrangement. Additionally, the income verification process does apply, so any subletters must also be under the income limit for their household size. By enrolling in the 4D program, property owners and managers agree to follow all applicable fair housing and tenant non-discrimination statutes, regulations, and policies. For assistance in creating a tenant selection plan, see St. Paul's Tenant Screening Guidelines policy. As part of ensuring fair housing in St. Paul, owners are required to advertise all vacant 4D units on Housing Link, a local affordable housing resource. The posts on Housing Link must specify that Section 8 or Housing Choice vouchers are accepted. During the annual compliance process, you will be asked to confirm on the rent roll form that you published all vacancies on Housing Link throughout the year. Lastly, a recent change to the 4D program at the state level mandates that tax savings must be used for the following purposes: property maintenance, property security, improvements to the property, and/or increases to the property's replacement reserve account. Other uses may be determined over time by Minnesota Housing and the City of St. Paul. Thank you for listening. If you have further questions, please reach out to the 4D program staff for assistance. You can email us at 4d@stpaul.gov. We appreciate your interest and partnership in preserving affordable housing in the City of St. Paul. Have a good day.